What happened to Nolan Wells? What do we really know? What are we supposed to make of the latest developments, which are, well, first things first. I'm Chris Cuomo. Welcome to Cuomo Crime Time. Here we go to players, people who are in the mix, real experts, and demystify narratives in favor of proof, okay? Because we only know what you can show in the court of law, right? Well, but I feel, but I think, doesn't work. That's why motive isn't even part of a crime. Did you know that? It's a big part of an investigation, means motive opportunity. But in terms of making a criminal case beyond a reasonable doubt, you have mens rea and actus reus, the mental component, the intent, and the action. Is the action what satisfies the law? Okay. Did they have the mindset for it? That's all there is. But there's no why. Does the jury want to hear it? Yeah. Is it a part of most trials? Yeah. But why isn't it? Because it's too hard to assess. It's hard to get into somebody's mind. Well, then how do you do the intent? As a function of the actions. You don't stab somebody 20 times and say it was an accident. Okay. So what do we know about these latest developments with Nolan Wells? What are we supposed to think about the audio of the distress call of the boat? What do we know about the boat in distress? What do we know about the timing? What do we know about what it signifies? It is being used in a lot of spaces and places to mean that they were in a panic because of what they had just done to Nolan. Is that true? What do we make of the video of a young black man saying, hey, I was good friends with Nolan Wells. Why are they saying that they don't know me? What could have gone into that? How much of this is about race and how much of this is about using race? Why don't we know what the investigators have? These are all good questions. Some of them are painful questions. What is this about? Brandon Tatum, big deal influencer, gets in all kinds of political fights, very confrontational. Has been confrontational with me. We've had disagreements. But he was in Mississippi. He talked to people. He got access. He has an understanding of the timeline that I do not, that I think is valuable to you. So guess what happens? Doesn't matter what has happened in the past about what it is. It's not like he kicked my dog. We disagree. Maybe I was right. Maybe he was right. Whatever. Doesn't matter to this. I wanted to talk to Brandon Tatum. I reached out. He has been making all of this news and a lot of attention to this story. And I wanted his take on what he knows and how it fits in and what questions it answers and what questions it raises. Brandon Tatum. Very excited to have Brandon Tatum. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Cuomo Crime Time, to give us your witness, give us your take on Nolan Wells.
Well, thank you, Chris, for having me on. You know, I love the fact that you and I can come together and do a podcast. It just tells you that you may not agree on everything, but in this country, we can still agree on the things that matter the most, and that's love of this country and being fair and balanced on these topics. But my thoughts on the Nolan Wells case is a very unfortunate case. I'm very saddened that this young man lost his life, which I think is being lost in the conversation. I mean, all the people that I've interviewed about Nolan is that he was a tremendous kid. Mm. He was incredible. He was loving. He was compassionate. He didn't have a single enemy. Those things are being missed and overshadowed by this racial undertone. And I'm not sure what happened to him. You know, obviously he lost his life out there at Horn Island. I'm not sure if someone killed him or he just simply drowned. I'm leaning more towards with the evidence that I have so far that more than likely he may have drowned. One thing that I think is inappropriate and should have never happened this early in the game is that they should have never implicated or introduced race into this situation. I think that the family and also Benjamin Crump, which the onus is on him more than anybody else, should have communicated with every party involved or potentially involved to get a balanced perspective before they introduced it to the world. And they didn't do that. And I think that they had intentions that were nefarious, in my personal opinion, regarding this situation.
So there's a lot there, and we should unpack all of it. You are definitely right, and this is common, that people become defined by how they die, not by how they lived, especially when it's a news issue. And one of the things that must burn so much for these parents is they did it right with this kid. And you can feel however you want about race or be post-race or whatever people call themselves these days. But to have a young black man in Mississippi get the grades, get it right on the field. You know, you were a ball player. I'm a failed ball player. To get to college the right way. Everybody likes him. Nothing ever went wrong. And now his life is over before it even had a chance to start, when they had done so much, put so much into him, and he had reflected it so well as a human being, is just a terrible tragedy. Terrible, because everything was done the right way. And now we're still here in the worst of situations. And you're right to highlight that. And in terms of the they, I have your concern about race, and we'll talk about it. I was triggered by a different they. I think coming out of the box, and as you guys may know, Brandon Tatum worked as a police officer for years in Tucson. All right. So he's not just talking about policing like me. He did it. Okay. I've been on ride-alongs, not the same thing. So them coming out quickly and saying, we don't have any proof of foul play here, I think was a triggering mechanism. They didn't have to say it. All they had to say is, we don't know yet. We're investigating. And I think there was something about that, Brandon, that made that family feel, and other people feel, boy, they're trying to get done with this a little quick here. I wonder if it's because he's a black kid. I think that if they had just said, we're investigating, this is terrible, all we know is we have the body, there's no obvious signs of anything yet, and just left it like that, it wouldn't have gotten so hot so quick. What's your take?
I agree with you, and I think there's two facets of different people that are involved in this, and I think that the police department didn't account for those different parties. One side is like me, where I am objective in this situation, and I want to know the truth, and I don't jump to conclusions about race or anything else unless I have unequivocal evidence to suggest that I should. But then there's the other side that have this historical trauma, and that has been passed down over generations, that the first time they hear a white, they put it together like there's white people, there's a black kid, and they're saying this, and it looks suspicious, and so therefore there must be an issue. And so there's two factions, and I think the police department was right in the middle, and I don't have a problem with them saying that it doesn't appear to be foul play. And I almost feel like if they did not say anything and they just said, we don't know what happened, we're going to just leave it alone, then people will be mad at that. So I think that it was fair, but I see how some people was upset with the way they presented it. But I think it was fair for them to say, we don't have any evidence of foul play at this moment. I think people should accept that and say, instead of jumping to the conclusion that they must be doing something nefarious, that they must not care about black lives, and that these people are incompetent and can't do their job properly, instead of jumping way over there, we can say, okay, that's what they have at the moment. Let's take that into consideration, and let's consider other things, and let's do an evaluation and figure out, do we need to go further in this? Do we need to criticize the police department further? Is this unprecedented in the way that Mississippi does what they do? You know, and I think that's the angle that I would have taken, is that I accepted what they said, and I go, okay, what are the other elements that are out there so I can evaluate it?
Well, emotion is going to beat the brain 8 times out of 10, right? So once people start feeling a certain way, it's hard to talk it through. And look, we've dealt with this before, the being transparent, as long as we know what is found and what isn't. And that's why I've felt what you've been doing is very helpful. Now, I will say one other thing. Somebody presented this to me, and it is an aggravating factor, but it is an interesting one. Imagine if this had been a big group of black kids and one white kid or 2 white kids were hanging out with them, and at the end of the night, the white kid wound up being dead. The level of curiosity that may have happened in the community and the media, that is interesting. I do think it would have been a very big deal also, and maybe for the wrong reasons.
Well, I agree, and I also disagree with at the same time. Like, I have never seen white activists like Benjamin Crump, the equivalent. There's been many injustices that have been done to white people, and there's also many mysterious deaths that have been perpetrated against white people, and I don't see them protesting. I don't see them coming out. There's no White Lives Matter organization. There's none of that. So I don't know if that's true. Like, people like to suggest that because of the historical context of racism and prejudice in this country, but when you look at it in a material way, you say, well, who's the white Al Sharpton? Who's the white Benjamin Crump? Who's the civil rights activist when something goes wrong for white people? And I would not jump to that conclusion unless I have concrete evidence. I ask people all the time, well, what other case are you referring to that you've seen a bunch of black kids, one white kid die, and then there's been a different level of intensity in the investigation compared to this one in the same city? You can't go to New York and think they do the same thing in the South that they do in New York is in California is in Arizona. You can't lump every law enforcement agency and investigative body together. You have to say, in Mississippi, has there been a case where a white kid was in a similar situation and they did a better job? If you cannot materially show that, then what you're doing is projecting.
Then it's not
something.
apples to apples. I get it.
It's not fair. You're projecting your own bias into something that may not necessarily need it to be.
I get it. I mean, look, you don't have another bad joke is a black guy sticks up his hand and says, I'm black and I'm proud. People see that as an empowerment thing. A white guy stands up and says, I'm white and I'm proud. He's a neo-Nazi. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
It's a different dynamic. White people don't need advocacy within the system. They have control, they have agency, they have privilege. So you don't have the same need for a Benjamin Crump on the other side because of the systemic and cultural realities. We get that, but we don't want to overplay when an inequality is present either, which is why I think it's been helpful to have you talking to people. Now, in talking to the kids, young men, whatever you want to call them, it's hard for me.
Yeah.
You know, once you're a parent and you're old like I am,
yeah.
It's hard for me to see teenagers or even people in their 20s as fully formed adults. I know they have to be legally responsible. I'm just saying it's hard when you've raised them and you know how not fully cooked they are. But what was the set of impressions you have about what is your best guess about what happened in terms of the timeline, which you can look at Brandon's social media and his YouTube page. He's done a lot of timeline work about what matters and what doesn't, because there's a big news hook right now, which is, wow, that distress call. Maybe the distress call is related to why Nolan Wells disappeared. Now, there's a huge problem with that, which is the distress call happened far away from the island. So I don't know how his body wound up all the way back at the island. But what do you make of the timeline and this distress call that's getting all this attention?
Yeah. So first, my impression of the young kids, boys, I'm just like you, man. These 18-year-old, you barely know what's going on in the world, So, but these young men were very respectful, great kids. They seem like Nolan, and now I can see why Nolan would want to hang out with these kids. Their parents were incredible. They were very respectful to their parents. They were very accomplished. Many of them were athletes and athletes in college. So these kids were a group of really good quality kids. Like, that's what I got from them. When they would talk to me, the way because sometimes you can see a lot about parenting and how kids are raised when you are in a position like me and you kind of on the outside watching interactions. And these young boys were incredibly respectful. And I think it's a Southern thing too. But I found them to be very authentic, very genuine. And that's my first impression of them. And the timeline, this is why I believe that Nolan may have drowned, and more likely than one of those young men killing him. Now, I do have a third theory that would lead to criminal activity, but I don't have it locked in yet. So I'll start from the beginning. These boys and Nolan were really, really good friends. They showed me pictures of them at prom. I mean, they told me they hang out with him 3 or 4 times a week when they're back for the summer. They've been knowing each other since middle school. They spent a night over each other's houses. The parents, reiterated the same thing. So it appears that all of these good friends, which they went last year on 4th of July at Horn Island, they almost go out there fishing every year. All the time they go fishing. So he takes me out there, and they articulated that they went out with a group of people, which means it wasn't just Nolan and 4 white boys. It was 3 boats full of kids, like about 30 of them. They went out there to an island where all of their other friends that they grew up with, and everybody's out there having a good time. And these young boys out there drinking, and you know how they do it. And it appears that there was an emergency on the boat. The boat was beginning to sink. They needed to get it out of there, or the boat was going to sink right there at Horn Island, which is like 7 to 10 miles from the freaking mainland. So this is a tragedy if they lose their whole boat out there. And so the boat is beginning to sink. They said that they had did the distress call. They were telling Nolan, get on the boat. This is at 4:30. And they weren't too far from Horn Island. They weren't far out. They told me they were probably like a quarter mile out, which is still in visible eyesight from the hundreds of boats that are there, thousands.
So they said as they started to pull away, they noticed they had a problem?
No,
were they sitting on the boat and they said, oh, we're taking on water while they were still anchored up?
Yeah. They would notice they were taking on water while they were still anchored. And what Warren told me was that he think because there was so many people on the boat that, more people than should have been on the boat, it began to sink. And he gave me all this detailed boat jargon, which I have no idea. I've never been on a boat, maybe 3 times in my life. And so he was just telling me that that's what had happened, and they thought it was, and they needed to get the water out of the boat. They need to unplug it and do all this stuff and get it on the high ground and drain it, and once they get it going, it'll pull the water out. All this stuff he was explaining to me, which I have no idea. He literally showed me on the boat, kind of what he was saying. So I got a small understanding of it. But he was saying that they yelled at Nolan, hey, man, get on the effing boat, man. We got to go. Like, we're sinking. We got to get out of here so we can save the boat. Nolan was hanging out with the girl, Katie, and he had stayed behind. Now, Tristan, which is the black kid that I interviewed, he said he saw him with this girl. The girl, I saw her text messages. They sent me her text messages to I believe it was Warren. And she had reiterated that Nolan never got back on the boat. She didn't see him get back on the boat he came on. And also that she heard them yelling for him to get on the boat, and he didn't. Now, her story is it's a gaps in there because it's hard to tell when she disengaged with Nolan. But from what I know, they left without Nolan. Which and your audience probably knows, was the big crux of everything. Why did they leave him behind at the island?
Yes.
So if they either left him or they didn't leave him. So with the idea that they left him seems to be consistent. They left. They said that they were going, and it's not abnormal for friends to go and come on different boats.
Right. And they didn't leave him alone. The initial
No. He was there with hundreds of
consideration was you left him on an island 10 miles off. What'd you think was going to happen? There were like 100. There were hundreds of boats there. There were lots of people.
Yes.
So did they give you a sense of Nolan wanting to stay behind? Drunk, out of character, because he was with a girl, that they were pissed off because they had to go, but they were more worried about the boat than him staying? Like, what was the vibe that you picked up?
Yeah. It was that what they were telling me, and there's a few boys kind of reiterate this, that Nolan was really feeling this girl, and they didn't know her. They had never really seen her before. And they were looking at their buddy. You probably know this, Chris. I mean, you've been in a place where you look at your buddy and he's kind of super interested in the girl, and you're like, bro, you really like, you really hang out with this girl. It's a bunch of women here. We all having a good time. You kind of interested in, and Tristan told me in the interview that he just looked at him and laughed at him, because he was having a good time with this girl. And so they didn't think it was anything abnormal. He's hanging out with a girl.
Because they didn't have any concerns he couldn't get home.
Yeah, no. It was no concern whatsoever, because some of the people that came in on the boat with them on the same boat that was sinking did not leave on that same boat. So it was 3 different boats, multiple friend groups, and you got to think Nolan could have been going back on the boat with the girl. I mean, these people, these young men are grown. This is not they're not babies. And you hanging out with a girl, you probably want to keep hanging out with her, and you may go back to the island with her, whatever the case may be. So they said it was nothing nefarious. They didn't think nothing of it. They told him to get on a boat because they had to leave. And he was like, "No, I'm good. I'll just get a ride back with somebody else."
And the phone, him leaving the phone, is that a function of him just forgetting in the moment? I get why you wouldn't take a phone with you into the water. Even if you're bouncing from boat to boat. I get it. I know that kids don't want to leave their phones, but I'm on a boat all the time, all right? I got water behind me. We're water babies where I live. Kids don't bring their phones into the water. It's a mistake.
In this situation, this is much more so. And the reason is I think people are not being able to put together visually what it looks like out there. You have your phone and stuff on a boat. You're next to the boat. You're not like necessarily floating off somewhere way away from the boats. It's tons of boats. So what you do is you hang out in the water, you drink, you're talking or whatever, and then when you want to do something with your phone, you just go to the boat, which is sometimes within arm distance or sometimes within several feet, and you get on the boat and do your Snapchat or whatever you got to do, and then you leave it on the boat because you're in water to your chest. People are not going to be holding their phone like this. And then the reception out there is kind of spotty. So it's not like they got Wi-Fi out there and everybody can just upload stuff. So a lot of people are not really interested in their phones. They've gotten away from the mainland.
So the phone on the boat was never going to be a dispositive fact. It seemed like that early on, but we were thinking land-based, not water-based. Then what did you pick up of? What's your best sense at this point, preliminary as it is, of, so they say, all right, you want to stay with the girl. How does Katie help? You were saying that it's not clear when she disengaged. Is there anything that you now know about what happened once they leave?
Yeah, it's nothing. It's still a big gap because a lot of his friends that knew him that we're communicating with, they were gone. And the only person left behind that we know of that can attest to any of this is that girl, Katie. And I saw some of her text messages, but we reached out to them to try to see if she can put some more context because everybody's saying that he was hugged up with Katie. Like literally, Warren said she was cradled in his arms. Like, he's feeling her, they feeling each other. So at what point do they separate? And at what time? Because the boys left around 4:30. Trayston left before the boys left because he got into a fight and his uncle made him leave and they got on a boat and left. And so all of this is going on. A lot of the boys that were with him had already left. Then the question is, who saw Nolan after this? How late was Nolan at the island from somebody's visual? And the fact that Katie, and I'm not saying she did anything wrong. I just have not had a chance to talk to her and get her context enough to rule out the fact that she may have been the last person to see him alive.
Did she talk to the cops?
I'm not sure, but I think she did.
They say they have 60 interviews.
Yes, so with that being said, I think that everybody
60 interviews. There's nobody not to agitate you about Ben Crump, but he is right, and so is the family, that somebody knows something, right? Because unless Nolan said, I'm not coming with you, I'm going to go to the island and run the length of the island, which is like 10, 12 miles long. Unless he said something like that, he was with other people when they left.
There's a great possibility that he was, and there's also a possibility that he could have wandered off and drowned because the way they described it, and people have drowned there often. Like I think they said like 3 or 4 people per year drown right there at Horn Island. And it's because of the tide. And it's a weird little situation on the west side of the island where they were at. And they were showing it to me. And it get rough. And there's an undercurrent.
They call it the washing machine.
Right. That's what they said, a washing machine. And so no matter how good of a swimmer you are, you get caught in the middle of that, you can drown. And when you're in an environment where there's hundreds of people out, there's music blaring, people are drunk, it's a possibility. I'm not saying this is the more likely possibility that I believe happened, but he could have wandered off to go pee, because they were saying that when you pee, you don't want to pee in front of everybody, so you kind of wander off. And there's a drop-off. If you get caught in there and you go under or you pass out because you're drunk, everybody's distracted. You can be gone like this and nobody ever know. But it does seem suspicious to me that nobody saw him. Now, with hundreds of people there. But here's another thing that I think, which is the problem why I think Benjamin Crump and them should have never been involved in this. Because now I'm getting the sense that people are afraid to come out and say anything, because even if you saw Nolan but you had nothing to do with it, you don't want to tell nobody publicly. You'll tell the police, but you don't want to tell anybody publicly because you will be masqueraded as the white person who killed Nolan Wells. And just like these boys are experiencing, even though they have an alibi that they weren't there when whatever happened to them happened. So I think that the community and people that are out there are scared. Now, they may have told them.
Well, there's got to be some other black folks and some Latino folks. It wasn't all white people who were there.
100%. And this is the thing. This is another thing, Chris, why I'm like, well, why would they jump to the race thing? Why don't they ask the black kids what happened to him? I mean, he was out there with all kind of friend groups. So why is the black kids okay with not knowing what Nolan did? And they left him too. If somehow they have no recollection.
Because it's Mississippi. That's why.
But
that's why.
Mississippi.
That's the cultural precept that blacks have been systemically discriminated against in that state egregiously. And that's why.
But here's the caveat to that. I agree. I know that has happened. That has happened all over the nation. But black people have also been the contributing factors of murdering other black people too, more recent in history. So, but this is why people can't prejudge things without the evidence, because what is the more likely thing that will happen to you? More than likely, you'll get killed by somebody that look like you. More than likely, the beef and the conflict will be with another black person versus white people in most cities, period. However, we know the historical context, but you can't produce that forever. You can't say forever and a day, because I'm in Mississippi, if a white person do anything, it's got to be a racial undertone. I don't think it's fair, because then what happens? There may be an actual suspect that's not black. I mean, that's not white, that they're not looking at, because they're saying it must be a racial thing. And it could be a conflict thing. It could be a drug thing. It could be somebody getting too drunk and Nolan passing out or falling off the boat, and now people are scared to say anything because they feel responsible. But one thing that I think people should realize is that it must have happened near Horn Island, because the authorities are saying because his body washed up on Horn Island and the way the current works, it must have happened somewhere in the area, like right in the area. It couldn't have happened offshore too far, because he wouldn't have washed up on land. So, but I just wish that people would slow down and let the investigation do its thing.
That is much more understandable than you did this on purpose because it was black. And George Floyd was a really interesting one for me, because the mistake that was made, it was pretty obvious. He had a lot of cell phone video. I don't know what Chauvin was thinking. I don't know if it's because he knew that guy and didn't like him, but I don't know what he was doing. When you got multiple other cops saying to you, this is bad, what's happening, you'd think you'd listen. But the mistake was making George Floyd a saint and trying to pretend that, this guy should have a statue to him. No, the situation should be remembered and learned from, but he is not a guy to sanctify, So that was a very tricky bit of business to walk through, and it became a catalyst for all kinds of shit, as you'll remember. We are now verify, and then we'll decide if anybody trusts anyway. But you got to verify.
What they did was they had MVR cameras. So they have the dash cameras in the car, and they didn't have the body cameras. And what people don't realize is that the body camera system itself is crazy expensive, because it's not just the camera. You got to buy into the cloud space, which is where they make all the money. Because when everything that you record has to be downloaded into a cloud and preserved for, I don't know, years. And you got to think, the bigger the department, the crazier that data is. And I remember one time we had a SWAT call. It was 40 of us on a SWAT detail, and the cameras were running for like 15 hours per person. I mean, 15 hours of camera roll nonstop for 40 people was insane amount of data. And so with that being said, this is why you don't defund the police. This is why you make sure that the police have enough budget to allocate these things so that they can be equipped properly. And the reason why I think that a department would give it to the SWAT and not the regular patrol officer, because more than likely, people don't understand this, you're never going to get in a shooting. I know people may not think that because of, the way the world is and social media, but like, I was on a SWAT team. I was a cop in probably one of the most dangerous places in Arizona, and I never shot anybody. Now, I pull my gun almost every shift, but I never had to kill anybody. Most people never killed anybody. And so SWAT team is a lot more dangerous, right? It's a lot more high risk. There's a lot of people. One of my SWAT guys was a sniper, and I think he killed like 4 or 5 people. So just him. So it's a different dynamic. So I can see why the liability would be for them to have body-worn cameras on a tactical SWAT team versus later
as
on.
a priority. Yeah, no, that's a great explanation.
But I do
helpful.
think they should, if they had it, they would have been exonerated.
When they got the cell phone cameras. They got the cell phone cameras. People out there.
I watched the video, it's not as clean as I would like for it to be, right? But I do think that there's a reason to shoot somebody in a circumstance like that. I don't know if you saw the full video without the blur over it, but they immediately after he got shot, they pulled a knife and threw it off of him. So
he definitely had a knife, and he may have, I don't know yet, he may have stabbed the guy who shot him.
They said he did. They said he did. There's a police report that said he did.
Right.
The officer had to go to the hospital for it. But when I watched the video, I didn't see it.
I didn't see him get stabbed either, but that doesn't mean he wasn't stabbed. It means I didn't see it.
Right,
and
exactly.
So here's what I saw, which I see a lot in these things. As, a self-defense guy. I've been studying self-defense and doing self-defense for decades. We don't give the men and women on the job enough training. They're not trained to know how to put people down in any real way, and we don't have the money and the time and the consistency that it demands. So, like most cops I see, when they get into it with somebody, unless they're unusually talented on their own, they don't look good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they can't control this guy. And they shouldn't have tried to cuff him before they had control of him. So they're like holding their cuffs, but they can't control him for whatever reason. So it looks bad. And she goes to the taser. You know, she calls it out. Doesn't seem to work. And the guy had been stabbed, and the shoot looks quick because you got 3 cops on top of him, and he's on the ground, you know, kind of sitting up. He wasn't face down on the ground. He's kind of sitting up. Yeah. Now, I can understand how a reasonable officer who has been stabbed and sees this guy who has a knife looking like in a position where he may be able to do something would freak out and shoot and have a reasonable fear of serious injury because he'd already been stabbed and he sees it. But the timing was terrible.
Yeah, or this guy was incredibly strong. Like, if you look at him, see, this is the thing that people don't realize, and these things come into account when you actually have to investigate a shooting death. The public don't realize this. They never put on a uniform. They never had to fight anybody. There's the balance and risk when you fight people that are crazy strong. Mm-hmm. If you're fighting a guy and
or just crazy and drugged up,
right?
All of a sudden they're like twice what they were,
and the fear kicks in when you're like, this guy's a superhuman. Like, he got 4 or 5 cops on him, 3 on the ground, and they can't control him. And then he gets in a point where he gets a knife. You're like, we can't, he's going to start stabbing people and doing this, and we can't stop him. And so the use of force may be justified. The public may not like the way it looks. But you made an incredible point, Chris, and I wish that the world would understand this. And if I had to give advice to police departments around the country, my God, please train your officers to know how to go hands-on. When I was a cop, we went hands-on. I never used my taser one time ever in my career. I pulled it out twice. One, I had to throw it to the corner of the wall and throw it in the corner. And the other one, it was a naked guy who was high on PCP, and I didn't want to touch him. So I threatened him with it, and he ended up going down. But other than that, like, I never used it because I was very confident in my physical fitness and also in my ability to wrestle and fight. And so I never had to get to that point of overusing tools, and now you're stuck in a position where you have a deadly weapon and you have to now use it. Because what happens is the overuse of tasers. This guy should have been handled and controlled physically by 5 people. But instead, they want to rely on a taser. And so they back off of him. The taser misses. It didn't activate. Now, she's out of it because she got a taser in her hand. She can't physically go hands-on. The other guy got handcuffs in his hand. So now he's not able to get his gun or do anything. And so you got 2 people out. The one guy who shot was on his knees when that altercation first started, and the other guy was on his knees. So these cops don't know how to wrestle. They don't know how to fight, and they're not confident. And now you're stuck with, oh, shoot, we have no resources to use. Now I got to go to a deadly weapon. And they need to be trained in jiu-jitsu. They need to be trained in boxing. And I promise you, Chris, 60% of physical altercations that lead in deadly force that don't involve a weapon being presented right away will be eliminated. I just saw a video, and I might do a video about it. A cop shot an unarmed dad. This may have happened a long time ago, but the video's resurfaced. It's a bad shoot. And the last shot was a bad shot. He shot him 3 times. The last one was fatal, and that was a bad shoot. But what happens is, this guy gets 2 videos. This guy gets out. He's screaming. He's bucking up at the cop. The cop goes straight to his gun. Now he's screwed because you can't transition out of the gun now that the guy is advancing on you. You can't go put it away because then you're in the middle and your gun is going to get taken. So he ends up getting into it with this guy. The guy keeps approaching him. He said, get back, get back, get back. He shoots the guy, boom, boom. The guy grabs his neck like this. He's not a threat anymore. But the guy don't know how to, he's afraid to fight the guy. So he can't shoot him, put his gun away, get into it. Now he shot him for the 3rd time, boom, he goes down. That cop is probably going to get charged. Here's the other one. it wasn't a death involved in this one, but this is a viral video that you're gonna see. This guy gets tased or something, or he's like on the ground. He gets up and he's going at the cop. The cop has the taser out like this. The guy hits the cop, knocks him unconscious. And thank God it was 4 of the cops around when they watched this guy knock one of their cops unconscious that they didn't have to shoot him. But this tells you they're all wussies. They're afraid. This one guy is bucking up and all the officers are backing off and they're afraid to get involved. And these things are the reason that cops get killed and the civilians get killed. And that needs to change.
I was with a guy once doing a training, and we were talking about reasonable fear of serious injury. And coach was a little bit of an older guy, but in self-defense, age really does, everything's over so fast that, like, you know, if they know what they're doing, that, like, I learned this lesson the hard way many times. And this guy was like, yeah, I totally don't get it, though. I mean, you know, you don't know, you know, this guy's going to kill you. I mean, come on. And this guy out of nowhere, this teacher, because we're having a conversation, whacks the guy in the side of the head with an open hand, making sure to get a little bit of an ear in it. And this guy is like, you know, and he's like, almost goes down, and he's like, how you feel now? If I was still coming at you, do you think that you're going to be seriously injured right now? Yeah. Or worse? And the guy, I got to tell you, as embarrassing as that was, humbling, he was honest. And he said, I got to tell you, I thought I was going to die for a second. Like when I first got hit, because he had never been hit in the head before. Yes. And if you have never been hit in the head and someone punches you in the face, it is a life-changing experience for somebody. Yeah. And if you haven't had that happen and you're an adult, I totally understand. And I know people get mad at me about this. I'm just saying, as someone who's been hit in the head a lot, I know that if I did not have that experience, that I would think, I think this guy's about to kill me. Like, this is it. Like, I don't think I can defend myself anymore. I got to shoot him. I get it. But if you were trained a lot, then you would not feel that way. And all you need to do is talk to an old cop. They made plenty of mistakes. There have been plenty of advancements. Police is much better today than it was in different ways, culturally and other ways years ago. But they would say, maybe the nightstick, but if you were stupid enough to mouth off to me, I would have popped you in the head, and the conversation would have been over. Yeah. And if I needed anything, I would have gone to the nightstick, which most people don't even carry now. And times have changed. And, you know, you can call them whatever you want because you did the job and you have your right to your own opinion. I think it's about preparation, because anybody who decides to be a cop, 9.5 out of 10 people have some mettle to them, because you know this is not going to be an easy job. So these men and women already got something in them that certainly I don't have. But if you don't know how to do it, I say all the time, people think I'm kidding. I would shoot so many people, even with all my self-defense, because I would be like, no, I got to go home. I'm going home tonight. You're not coming at me. I don't know what you have. I don't want to deal with it. Not the right disposition. But these are conversations, the way you started this, people don't want to have. Yeah. Tatum is one of those weird black guys who's anti-black, and you can't even talk to him about it. It's not the world I live in. I live in the world of conversation. If we disagree, we disagree, but we can still talk to each other. Going back to Nolan Wells, do you have confidence that there's going to be a real answer about what they found in that autopsy? Because there's a disconnect for me. If the first autopsy showed drowning, in the lungs, and there's no sign of anything else, why go to a grand jury? So the fact that they are impaneling one, how do you read that?
Yeah, what they've come out to the public and said is that this is typical. No matter what happens, it's not like this is somehow an admission or a building up of a case, like they have suspects or not. Any one of these suspicious deaths that they don't have a conclusive answer to, they have to bring all of their materials to a grand jury as a form of process. So the average person thinks that, oh, they're impaneling the grand jury. That must mean that there are suspects in a crime that will be presented. And that's not the case. What it is that they got to get all the evidence together, and therefore, in an impartial process, they go, we push all of this to a grand jury no matter what the circumstance is, so we're consistent across the board. And it could be come to a point where there's nothing there. That was just a drowning. So this is process and routine. This is not necessarily an indication that there was a crime. I'm pretty confident. I don't have any reason not to be confident, right? I mean, I'm pretty confident that they're going to find out, or they're going to be transparent about what they know. I'm not very confident that they're going to get real answers from people about what happened to Nolan. But I am confident that they're going to present to the public everything they have. I would be more confident if Benjamin Crump was never involved and the parents had come together as a community and said, let's come together as a community and find out what happened to my son. All his friends, they all get together. If they did that, I think it would be more conducive for regular people in the populace to say, I did see him at 6:30. I didn't see nothing happen, but I saw him at 6:30. Or somebody say, I did see him at 8 on a boat, that boat over there. But when you start interjecting these things in here, the person who did something to him ain't gonna say nothing. The person who may have seen it now don't want to say nothing because they don't want to be accused of killing Nolan Wells. So, but I'm confident that because they're being transparent too. I mean, Benjamin Crump had an opportunity for a second autopsy, which they did, and they presented it, and it was inconclusive initially, waiting on toxicology and different things like that, which is probably the same results as what happened with the state. It's nothing different. It's the same soup warmed over. And so in the phone extraction. So the police is going to extract Nolan Wells' phone and see if there's any tampering or deletion that could be tied to some nefarious means. And Nolan Wells' family will be a part of that, which was agreed by the state and their attorneys. They're being transparent. I don't think they have anything to hide.
I don't have any problem with their decision after that initial thing. The police side, except for the governor coming out and saying something that showed that he's paying attention, but he didn't know anything. They're not putting out any more word until they go through their process. I'm okay with that because as long as it all comes out eventually, I don't need them to compete with the family's attorney or go point for point or any of that. I understand that even though I'm in the media and I want as much access as I can get, as soon as I can get, I get that determination. Do you know whether or not the friends are cooperating in terms of their cell phones?
Oh, I would have to ask specifically, but they told me we did everything the cops wanted us to do. We cooperated right away. Many of them took lie detector tests. It wasn't technically a lie detector test traditionally. It's another form of like a cognitive lie detecting thing. It's not called a lie detector test. That's why I say a lie detector test equivalent. But it's the same proficiency. It's maybe more accurate. But every boy except one took the lie detector test, and they passed. And they all cooperated with the police right away. And I'm assuming, I want to verify, and I think my team is listening to me, maybe we can verify, that I think Nolan and all them gave their phones over too. So
I got to tell you, and this will upset people. As an attorney, and having done this as long as I have, there's no way you're getting my son's phone. There's no way he's taking any kind of cognitive anything. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I would be suspicious that when you people, meaning law enforcement and the government, if you want to make a case, you're going to make a case. You're just not going to make it on my son because he said something that you can take out of context,
Yes.
or he got flummoxed by something, or he has some sense of guilt because he loved this kid. And he feels like, man, everybody's so angry. I must have fucked up. You know, I'm not putting that on my barely baked son who's 18, 20, whatever they are. I got one of those animals in my house. I've got a 20-year-old boy in my house. And I could absolutely, you're not getting it. You want to come? Come. But I'm not giving it to you.
Yes.
I'll tell you that. And I know that sounds like I have something to hide. That's not why I'd be doing it. Even if he said to me, Dad, here's exactly what happened. I'm okay. I'd be like, I understand. I understand you're okay. I also understand why they're asking and what they're looking for, and I'm not giving it to them.
You're 1,000%, and I'm the most pro-cop person on the planet, but there is no way that anybody should talk to law enforcement without an attorney. Because what happens is, Chris, is that sometimes law enforcement can be shady, right? Mm-hmm.
They're allowed to lie. They are allowed to lie. Yeah.
We lie to people all the time. I mean, and we don't lie to you because we want to arrest the wrong person. We lie to you because we want to figure out how to get to the right answer. Mm-hmm. And people were mad at some of these boys, because initially none of them had an attorney. They got attorneys later. Warren had an attorney right away, and it probably because his stepmother was a judge and they understand his law process. So they were like, no, you're going to get an attorney first, so they don't lock you in and say something and you accidentally say something, or they take some of your stuff out of context and you go to jail for something you didn't do. But the other boys did all of this, communicated with police, lie detector tests and all this, no attorney. They later got representation. And so people are like jumping into the gun and saying, oh, why did they get attorneys? They must have did something wrong.
I totally understand why you would think that.
But in reality,
I get it,
no.
I'll tell you where I learned this lesson while we're in share mode.
Yeah.
Duke Lacrosse. I'm covering that case, and we never had any reason to believe that the prosecutor was a bad guy. And because we're not used to that. You know what I mean? They usually, if there's all this attention on you, usually most of what's coming out of you is going to be accurate and fair because everybody's watching. And all those boys went in there. They were told by the cops they couldn't call their family. They weren't allowed to alert the school. They have to come in. They're dumb. You know, they're just young guys. They don't know anything. They all went in. He had them take their shirts off. And because she had said, the complainant had said that she was raking at the boys who were molesting her. And they all got them off. These are all lacrosse players. They're in practice every day with guys hitting them with sticks. So who knows what kind of marks are on their body. They all took their shirts off. They all did everything the prosecutor, and it turned out he was dirty. And he was advancing a bad complaint from a woman against these Duke lacrosse players who had made up the complaint. And when I covered that story, and I was at ABC News at the time, I was the chief law and justice correspondent. We wound up changing the timeline and helping the boys get exposed that this prosecutor was bad. And that's what happened. He wound up, paying the price for it, and all the boys got off, but their lives were changed. That's when it clicked for me that, I get it.
The only reason I only had one interview, two interviews, because the other boys and their families were very concerned that if they, and I talked to them off camera, but they were concerned that if they get on camera, which I've seen them do this with Warren. Thank God more people than not are understanding what he's saying. But I've seen people take Warren's stuff out of context and lie completely about what he's saying. And so some of the other parents had concerns, and lawyers were like, no.
It makes sense.
One word that you say on a podcast, and then they twist it, and now they're framing your kid in a way that, and then his life is over. Because
that's right.
If they never get a resolution in this, these boys will forever go down. This is the reason why I was open to talk to them, because they approached me. I didn't approach them. I wasn't going to go out there or nothing. I didn't know these kids. I wasn't trying to interject myself in the situation. But once I started seeing things that didn't add up, and they said, hey, man, we would like to tell our story. We trust you. You've been fair in this. We would like to talk to you. I said, well, why wouldn't I want to hear from every side? And if they want to talk to me, in my opinion, I'm like, they must be pretty confident they didn't do this, right? And so I went down there and I talked to them. But, some of the other boys, and I don't blame their parents, because if they don't come to a solution here, which means that the autopsy remains inconclusive or undetermined, and there's no suspects that's come out, if they cannot determine that he drowned, then it's going to be an open book. It's going to be an open mystery. And forever, these boys are going to be framed as, you killed Nolan and got away with it. And that's just not fair if they didn't do it. I want the person, if Nolan was killed by somebody, I want that person to be found. Now, here's the thing that I think, I am suspicious still.
This is your third theory that's not fully locked in.
My third theory, and this is the theory that somebody may have done something to Nolan. Now, that's not my highest priority theory based on what I know, but it's the possibility that I'm entertaining in my mind. I don't understand this Katie situation, because this girl didn't really know the friend groups and nobody really knew her. And I don't know why they're just listening to her statements and believing everything she says. And she's the only one that didn't really know him like that. And then I saw some text messages where she was on a boat with people that none of these friend groups know. And so to me, it would almost make sense that maybe he hung out with her a little more and she know a little more than what she's saying. Now, I'm open to interview her and talk to her off camera, on camera. I told their legal counsel that we could talk, because if she didn't have nothing to do with it, I want her name to be cleared. But it's just still, it's like I almost think that maybe he may have been with people that didn't know him, and he was wanting to hang out with this girl, and maybe something happened. Whether he got super drunk, they took drugs, he ODs or something, and they panic, and they drop him where he was late, where a lot of people were gone. I mean, because we don't really know when Nolan died. They don't have a clue. Nolan could have died that night. I mean, Nolan could have died the next day. I mean, I don't know. And so I wonder, was he with the group of people that didn't know him well? He gets caught up in some drugs or something, and he ODs or something like that, and then they panic and they leave him. Because the other death of another young black kid that happened more recently, I think it was in Texas, that's almost exactly what happened. Something happened to him. He drowned. His friends panicked. They throw his clothes and his phone in the water. And they were charged with obstruction of justice, or obstructing or tampering evidence. And so when you're young and you're dumb and you're doing stuff you shouldn't do, they don't know Nolan very well. I'm just this is totally hypothetical.
Right.
They don't know him very well, so they don't care. So if he ODs or something, they're like, we're all going to go to prison for this kid. And let's just leave him behind and let's get out of here like nothing ever happened. But if it was a friend, I think the friend would have been more concerned with his life than concerned with covering it up. I can't imagine them boys that I met. Like this video, we didn't get to that. I just want to get to that audio real quick. I listened to it. I turned the volume up. I do not hear them clearly saying, Nolan, is he dead and all this. I don't hear that. And it doesn't match with the timeline, because this was ran around 4:30, and I think people may have saw Nolan a little bit after that. He was still with that girl after that. And so this wouldn't be him dead on a boat in front of everybody. So I kind of find it to be, kind of weird and suspicious when they're claiming that that's the case. And even then, I don't think that their first instinct with their best friend is to go, he's dead, we're going to cover it up and not get him help. We're not going to call the Coast Guard to help him and to revive him or give him medical attention.
But do we know give people the context of the audio that we're talking about?
Yes, I think it was the emergency call they called for the boat assistance, meaning that they were sinking and they say, hey, we need help. They had a membership to this program that helped boats in distress. And I think they ended up calling it off.
Because as they started to drive the boat, so as a boater, they probably called sea tow.
I think a friend was towing them out, and they couldn't wait on the sea tow, right? They couldn't wait on them to get there, and because they were in a distress, they were sinking. Right. Warren said they were going under. The water had come up to the batteries. They were going down, and so I think they had a friend kind of tow them out a little bit. They wanted to get the boat up higher so they can drain the water, and then so that they kind of canceled after they made that panicked request. And you got to think they probably was drinking. So they all panicking.
They were drinking, but they also grew up on boats. So if you grew up on boats and you tie up a lot, this is not the first time you've seen a boat take on water because it was pushed below the scuppers and it started to take it on because of weight or whatever else. So, and then once it's okay, then you call it off. But the audio and the urgency is being used to suggest that that's when it happened, that they are in a panic because something happened, and it's not the boat, it's Nolan. And the whole story of come with us, come with us, come with us is fake. But except for Katie, who is not part of their group, who has suggested, at least in what I've seen, that she remembers the moment of them telling Nolan to get on the boat. And that's going to be something they corroborate, Brandon. There's no way that they get away with, no, I saw them leave altogether. Nolan was on the boat. If that's true, that Nolan was on the boat when they left, this is over. They're gonna know that.
And I'll say this: if there's some evidence that Nolan was on a boat and they left with him, and there's witnesses to say they left, first of all, they would be arrested at this point, I think, by the police. But if they did, then that means they lied to me on the podcast, and they deserve to be implicated in this. But it appears that independently of their statements to me, Katie confirmed. And I saw the message thread with them talking to her about other stuff. I saw the same thing. Okay, so did you see Katie, like, at one of those messages say, they screamed at him to get on, and she said, I did not see him get on the boat he came on. I didn't see him get on that boat. So, and I don't think Katie would be covering for anybody because they didn't know Katie.
Right.
and she has no reason to support them, because if she saw them killed, she want to get her name cleared. But it appears that she's not saying that she saw what happened to Nolan. So it's a very, people, Chris, want to make it out to be what they perceived in their mind that it is. Some people, they cannot see that these kids didn't kill Nolan. They can't see it. I don't care. Jesus Christ could come down and say Nolan did not die at the hands of these kids, and they will say, I don't believe in Jesus no more. And they will go in the direction of confirmation bias. I don't know what happened to Nolan. I don't know none of these people. I think Nolan was a great kid, and I want justice for him. And so that's why I want to take an impartial approach and say, if you ain't had nothing to do with it, rule them out. Come on, rule these people out, man. Quit damaging other people's lives. Let's weave to what happened to him. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's get past the foolery. And Benjamin Crump, this is what bothers me, right? Because from what I heard from people that were there, that are in this group, were saying that Nolan's parents weren't as focused on his race stuff. They weren't even focused on that. It was going to be a community thing. We're going to come together. We're going to find out what happened to Nolan. And when Benjamin Crump and them came into town, it got weird. All of a sudden, the parents are on television saying, we don't know these people. And
I saw the interview that you had with the kid, and he's saying, what do you mean you don't know me?
His mom got on TV, as everybody has seen, and said that she didn't know me. And, man, that can't be farthest from the truth. Me and her son went on trips together. We went to Florida for spring break together. You don't know me? I'm in all these homecoming and prom photos as our whole friend group. Me and Nolan are standing next to each other. You don't know me. Him being the only black person, minority, any of that measure is insane. Our friend group is diverse from the max. Like, we have a mixed guy. I mean, we had Nolan in our friend group. There's an Asian a part of our friend group. There's a Latino that they're trying to perceive as white. He's truly authentic Mexican. His parents are from Mexico. They came over legally and they did everything right, and he's been here since. It blows my mind, because our friend group is not a friend group that sees race. Our friend group sees what good you do for other people, what good you bring, and how the type of person you truly are.
What's your read on that? That, do you think that they were just saying we don't know everybody who was there, or do you think that they're just all screwed up emotionally because they lost their son? What's your explanation?
There's three things that come to my mind. I know a lot of people think that I'm forming an opinion. It's like three things that I'm evaluating that I don't know which one is true. One could be that they don't consider him to be a close friend, which means that don't mean he wasn't a close friend, is that they don't consider him as a close friend. They perceived that others were closer to him, and in the haze of what all this stuff is going on, they're not in a press conference remembering everything that has ever happened. They could be clouded in that. So I could see how that happened. I could see how there could be a situation where he's lying to me, right? I don't think he is. He showed me all these pictures of prom and all this stuff, but there could be a position that he's lying to me and Mama's right. The third one is that it's a grift. Because
not by the parents.
Well, I don't know. It could be by the group, right? Parents could be included, could be. Because he came out on ABC and said it's not about race. He contradicted Benjamin Crump because he said that wasn't Nolan, that was me getting into an altercation. And with that being said, now they have to distance themselves from a person who is obstructing the narrative. Because he's saying, I'm Nolan's best friend and nothing had to do with race. Nolan was not arguing, that was actually me. And now the narrative, I think, was attacked. Benjamin Crump's narrative was attacked. And so I can see the plot being, we got to distance ourselves from him because he's messing up the narrative. And that could be the manipulation from Benjamin Crump against the family who's mourning, and he's taking advantage of them. Because all of a sudden he's like now being ostracized. All of a sudden everybody that's putting it in context and saying, well, like the kid Jaden, I forget his name. I think it's Jaden or something like that. he's getting threats. I saw his post on Instagram just recently. He's getting
But
threats.
everybody gets threats.
No, I'm saying he's
Everybody
getting
gets
threats because he said he initially came out and said it wasn't about race.
Right.
We were all good friends, and they went after him.
Yes.
And then he went and did another interview with his mama on the thing with him. And mama, from what I hear, is pushing that idea of race when he don't believe that and don't think that. He's in the friend group with all these other white boys, and he don't feel that way.
But, you know, look, parents and kids can feel differently, but here's what we know is you're going to get attacked in this day and age. Everybody attacks, especially when there's anything incendiary involved, let alone race. You know, there are people who believe, I sat on a jury with one once, that you can't, there's been too much systemic inequality, there's been too much systemic racism. I will never believe it's done the right way. If there's any suggestion it was done the wrong way, I believe it was done the wrong way because that's my experience and that's what I've seen. And that's it. These are hard because they're hard positions because it matters so much. And we've made it matter so much. And this story is wrapped up in that. But I will say, first autopsy, different than second autopsy. They know a lot more in that first one. Why? They had the full body intact. They had it sooner. Toxicology will probably be the same result, first to second. But, you know, they removed tissue and organs, which is very usual for them to do more investigation that they didn't have in the second process. So they didn't have any of the tissue around here because they had removed it. And there's a reason that they removed it. So they may know things. They may know that it was a drowning. And they may, you know what I mean? You don't always know. You know, Brandon knows all this as being a cop. But, you know, just when you drown doesn't mean they always find water in the lungs or in the stomach. They usually do. They don't always. And even if they do, oh, so he drowned. We still don't know if it's a homicide or an accident or even a suicide. Why? I don't know. Why'd he drown? If Brandon holds my head underwater and I drown, that's different than me not knowing how to swim well or getting caught in a washing machine. So they will know more. It will be helpful. I am okay with not knowing right now. It's not easy, makes the job harder, but if they're going to present it to the grand jury, as long as it comes out afterwards, then that is due process. And then you can make your judgments.
And Chris, that's fair to the family. And if I was their attorney, like I said, I despise Benjamin Crump because I feel like he's adding fuel. If I was their attorney, I'd say you should appreciate that they're not releasing this to the public because it would interfere in the investigation. If they come out now and they go, the autopsy yield that he drowned, right? They said he drowned. The person who killed him now knows that they're off the hook. The person who may know that this person killed them are like, I'm not going to come forward now because it's over. Like they believe he drowned. I'm going to escape this. Not knowing what happened gives them time to get people to come forward still. And also, you don't want to give too much. And I think Benjamin Crump hurt the family in this investigation. One, because I know that they know that he drowned. They may know he drowned and Benjamin Crump is just looking for money. Because if I was Benjamin Crump, I would not have put the autopsy out there prematurely. Because if I was a witness and I'm a police department and I'm trying to get witness statements and I now got a lead, I don't know if the witness is telling the truth or not. I cannot determine if the witness saw this on social media or the witness was on the scene because this happens in law enforcement all the time. You're able to determine the authenticity of a person's statement based on information that never was public. So if someone says, hey, yeah, I saw him on the boat and like it was two guys fighting and one guy hit another guy with a pipe in the back of his head. And they go, where'd he hit him at? It like right in the base of his neck. Well, we didn't release the autopsy to show that he had damage here. That person's may be very authentic that they were physically there, and this is not some ploy to get a $150,000 reward by putting fake information out there. Or the suspect, they may say he had a laceration to the side of his neck with a sharp object. Well, the person who did it, if they ever get questioned after the information is divulged, they're gonna make sure they say, I never touched his neck. I never hit him, or I never did this. They can preset their interview to make sure that they don't align with none of the evidence you have. That's why they hold off on it. They don't hold off because they want the public to be in the dark. They just don't want to mess this up. This boy's life is on the line. His parents need justice, and they can't go out prematurely and mess it up, because it's the same thing with Charlie Kirk, and we could probably get to that in another interview, but it's the same thing with Charlie Kirk, that people were like, why didn't they not put information out? It's because you can't, if there's another suspect involved, you can't say where they shot him from. Like, for instance, the video that wasn't released was they had video of him on the roof.
Right.
It wasn't until the trial that they released the video of him actually going in prone position and shooting Charlie. But before that, they only showed him run across the roof. They didn't ever show the part where he walked up in prone. And that's because if there's other suspects or other material, they don't want the public to know that and then change their
And look, you don't want to
statements.
I mean, you're going to have to give it all to the defense anyway, as part of the discovery process. But you're not in a rush to give anything too soon. As police and prosecutors, it's a big point of frustration, not just as a lawyer, but as a journalist. Why? Because the more I know that you don't know, the better for me. And there is something competitive to this. There's something adversarial to this. And I don't want you to, what you're suggesting, I don't want you to come up with answers that meet what you know I know. Because I want to get you without that benefit. And it's a balancing test. And it's frustrating. And it is more frustrating these days because there's less trust, if there's any trust at all. We're seeing that with ICE every day. You know, I just did a video before I came on with you. Tom Homan was right to say to Dana Bash that we're not making mistakes. And she was wrong to say you are making mistakes, because I don't think anything's a fucking mistake. I think that when you are telling guys to do it a certain way, and you know, you're making them political players, which they shouldn't have ever done to the men and women doing the job, it's not a mistake. If I'm telling you it's okay, I'm telling you to do it this way, then you're not making a mistake when you do it that way.
Right, you train that way. It's just like Chauvin with the neck thing, you know, like they trained him to do it. He just was excessive. And this is one thing, and I'll throw out there that I think, because I wrote in my book that Chauvin was wrong. He was wrong. Even though George Floyd, more than likely, he died from ODing, but they didn't charge Chauvin with intentionally killing George Floyd. And the people don't understand that. They charged him with a depraved mind and a lack of supporting him as he's dying, which in that state ended up being like second-degree murder, and which was the appropriate charge. We are not trained to, you could be trained to put your knee on somebody in that fashion, but not till they die.
Right. I think the recklessness is the right mens rea, is the right mental set. Depraved mind murder, we'll talk about it in another interview. That is a really bad statute because of how it was used. It was designed for something very specific, and it got used by prosecutors after some terrorism acts as like a midpoint between first and second degree murder. And it was misused. And in New York State, I covered this story where they had to undo all these prosecutions, Brandon, because it was never what the law was intended for. And you had like these bad guys. I had a guy who lives right near me, still does, probably watching this, where he thought this guy across the street who liked young girls was going to do something to his daughter because the guy said he was going to do something to his daughter. So he walks across the street with his shotgun to say, let's hear you say it now. And the guy's like, yeah, I'll say it right now. And he shot him. He killed him. And they charged him with depraved mind murder because it was kind of like, did he mean it? Was he just going over there to confront him? And he wound up writing the appeal himself, by the way, that, hey, this law was never meant for this. And he was right. And the Court of Appeals turned over the conviction. So I'm very nervous every time I hear depraved mind murder. But I'll tell you what, I'm happy we had this conversation. And, you know, how people disagree matters more than the basis of disagreement most times. We're both trying to figure out what happened here, and I believe for the right reasons. Thank you for sharing what you know. Thank you for going through it with me. I'm always a call ahead to return the favor.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Chris, for having me on. Finally, we had a chance to talk, and maybe we'll reverse this and come on my show and talk about a few things. So I appreciate you. I really do. I thank you for reaching out. And like I said, the public may not know this, but me and you have had some disagreements, but I always felt like you were a reasonable person and a real guy and an authentic guy. And I knew that one day you and I would probably have a conversation and probably smoke some cigars. So I appreciate you being a real People don't know this. Like, we have had disagreement, but you reached out to me like a man, and you told me, I disagree with you on this, I disagree with you on this. And I tell you what, Chris, I respect that more than anything that anybody's ever done. There's rarely that somebody will directly say, hey, man, this is how I feel. I disagree with you like a man. Other people get all weird, man. So that's why I respect you, and that's why I appreciate you, man. And one day we'll link up.
Well, we will. I'm happy to talk politics with you. There'll be plenty of situations to do it. And I don't have any problem with this being, with disagreeing. Right. I'm wrong all the time. I change my mind about things. Life goes on. You learn different lessons. How we talk to each other and the idea that you just never deal with anybody who doesn't agree with you is killing us. Brandon, be well. Thank you very much. And I respect your success.
Thank you. God bless you, man. Appreciate it.
First of all, I think Tatum is a fair broker on this. I don't share his feelings about Benjamin Crump, but that's not what's important. I'm not here to defend Benjamin Crump. I did defend why Benjamin Crump is necessary, and the idea of advocacy and the idea of what we know about race and systemic racism and this justice system and the difference between white and black in terms of needing advocacy within the system. And we disagree about those things. But in terms of the timeline and what really should matter here and what a god-awful tragedy this is, that's such a good young man and a family that had put good things into him and gotten him through so much of the hard part of life, getting him through high school, getting him into college, having him be successful in his own right, having him be well-mannered, and that he knew how to treat people and people loved him for the right reasons. All of that is lost in something that we don't even understand yet, and who knows, may have well been avoidable. That's why it matters. That's why Nolan matters. That's why this case matters, and that's why we're going to stay on it here at Cuomo Crime Time. Thank you for being different. Thank you for buying the swag to show that you're a critical thinker, that you're a free agent, that you're not some lemming who's just going to adopt a narrative. Thank you for checking me out in the morning at Sirius Radio, 7 to 9 Eastern, on NewsNation at night, 8 p.m. Eastern, and at the Chris Cuomo Project, of course. I appreciate all of it. The challenges are real, my brothers and sisters. The approach remains the same. Let's get after it. Lindsay Clancy is going to jail. That's what the prosecutor says. Can they prove it? Maybe, and I'll tell you why. I'm Chris Cuomo. Welcome to Cuomo Crime Time. I got to tell you, I'm going to do this episode a little differently. I'm going to do an interview with a doctor and a lawyer who both have experience in these areas, clinically, obviously, and in the jurisprudence in terms of how they got dealt with. And I believe it really goes to the heart of whether or not we got a legal system or a justice system. Is this about just doing what the law says and fitting it into a box, or is this about really fairness? Because to me, this case is nonsense in a court of law, okay? To me, it doesn't make any sense that we would waste the time and the money to put someone on trial who clearly was not in their right mind. But that's not enough. And it really wasn't enough until very recently. The test had been so antiquated, so primitive. If you knew the nature and consequence of your actions, which means what? If you know that taking this and bashing it into my head is going to hurt me, maybe kill me, then you're responsible. But what if you were doing it because you thought I was a demon? What if you were doing it because there was something in your head calling itself Jesus, telling you that you had to do it? Well, now what? The law was like, what do you want me to say? Anybody could say that. Now, you talk about it as a function of drug addiction. Forget it. They really didn't want to hear it. Wait a minute. You took these things, you took this drug, this booze, this pill, this whatever, and now you want to be excused from the behavior that came with it? No way. Now, those two paths have diverged. It is still tough with the argument of diminished capacity and what does it mean that you were drunk? What does it mean that you were high? Still a tricky avenue, very unforgiving. And I understand that a little bit better, morally as well as legally. And then you have this other path, which is, but they were really sick. And that sickness crossed the line from neurosis to psychosis, which you'll learn about today. And this person clearly was not connected to reality. And the law has slowly started to evolve. Or has it? Now, Massachusetts, as you're going to learn, is the right place for this for a number of reasons in terms of testing our evolution, because they're bringing this case in a place where I would have argued they shouldn't have brought it. And you'll see why. And we do it in the context of what it reminds us of. Andrea Yates. Ooh, I covered that. It was scary. Right around 9/11, 2001, Texas ceremonially drowned kids, other kids watching the other kids get drowned. Horrible. 5 kids found guilty. Capital murder, but they didn't ask for the death penalty. Then retried because the expert in the case, well, I'll tell you all about it. You'll learn. But it sets up this central proposition that I'm going to start with in terms of the medicine and the law, and then we're going to talk to Rusty Yates. You're going to hear what it's like to experience this, what it's like to try to survive it, to move past it. Is that ever possible? And how did he testify on her behalf? And what happened with their relationship and where is it today? All of these things, his advice for Patrick, the father of Lindsay Clancy's 3 kids, Cora, Dawson, and Callan. Why does this go to trial? What is the difference between legal responsibility and moral culpability, and where does illness bridge those two? It is a really fascinating test of our law and our culture and what we mean by justice. Sara Azari and Dr. Birndorf, thank you very much. I need your help on this one. I do not understand this, and I'll tell you why. I understand what's happening here in terms of the prosecution not believing that this is really about illness and that she knew and she planned and she got the husband out of the house. But here's why I really think that this is such a huge waste of public effort and money. So I covered one of the first stories in this category many, many years ago. One of the first of her kind. Was a doctor, psychiatrist, Harvard, one of the first classes of women in psychiatry at Harvard. She goes on, she becomes a big deal in New Jersey, running shit, gets depression. Not postpartum, but develops a case of depression. Pretty bad. Doesn't want anybody to know because she's afraid of the stigma and that they will remove her from her exalted position, and she was already dealing with all kinds of ceilings. So she plays with the medication, being a psychiatrist herself, and winds up spiraling, having a completely psychotic break where she suffocates both of her elderly parents, whom she was taking care of, puts them in a semicircle and sleeps in the middle of them for days. Eventually, she kind of gets a moment of clarity, calls 911. They come, they take her away, and the prosecutor's going to make the case. And luckily, someone in his family had profound mental illness. And he wound up developing a different understanding, going to the judge with the defense. And this was like a landmark case in New Jersey, saying, I'm not going to prosecute this case. She's got to go to a hospital and she's got to get treated. She doesn't know what she was doing. She thought she was doing some ceremonial transmission of their spirits to the world of where they needed to be. It was complete craziness. So they didn't prosecute the case. She went to a mental hospital. They wound up getting her chemistry right. And she completely changed and spent many, many years in this hospital beyond where I think it was necessary because of this instinct to punish. We want to punish. Even if you're sick, we want to punish. So even once she got her chemicals right, Sara, and she started redesigning the protocols in the hospital to make it more effective, and she changed their outcomes, and she's planting gardens, and she's doing this, and she's talking to other people, and they want to get her certified, but she couldn't get out because they got to punish. They got to punish. You got to stay in that hospital, even though you're basically what we would call cured, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's who we are as a society. And it's always given me that. And I look through every case through that lens. So I look at Lindsay Clancy, and it's so obvious that even her husband who has no business being rational about this situation, okay? I would never be able to hear a full sentence from you about the death of one of my kids as anything but the worst thing in the world. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear anything else. And yet he is going to testify on her behalf. He says that this is not someone who meant to do it. So that is my context. I don't understand why we're here. So with that, we'll bounce back and forth with each other about the medical and the legal. But Sara, just first blush, I know you get where I'm coming from, but what am I failing to see here?
Well, number one, there are 3 children that have been killed, right?
Yes.
And so not, one single public official is not going to be wanting to be the decision maker about whether or not to charge or not charge. Because remember, this is not about a lesser offense. This is about all or nothing. The defense is saying she should be acquitted based on a lack of legal criminal responsibility, which is the insanity test under a case called McHowell in Massachusetts. So it's not like we're looking at second degree versus first degree. It's all or nothing. And so there is no middle ground for the prosecution to go with. And one person doesn't want to make that decision. That's a decision for a jury and a public trial on the record, And also remember, Chris, we talk about this in a lot of cases on your show. Mental illness is not a defense, right? Mental illness, a lot of people have profound mental illness, and under these insanity tests are found to be able to appreciate the wrongfulness of their conduct and be able to comport their conduct to the law. So just being mentally ill does not cut it. So even if the prosecutor believes that she did have a psychosis, she did have a break, and all of this with her husband and her support is all there, it's almost like they're forced to let the process unfold, and let the jury decide whether or not she was aware of what she was doing.
How can you form intent when you hear voices telling you what to do and you ceremonially strangle your 3 children and then jump out the window trying to kill yourself, which is exactly what the voice was doing? How does that satisfy the mental component of criminal responsibility?
You're asking me or Catherine?
You, because she's a doctor, not a lawyer.
Yeah. So it's really about, it doesn't matter whether you call it, it's the diagnosis is not the evidence. It's about the mental defect or disease at the time.
Right.
And my understanding from psychosis, just having, my own clients, not postpartum, but just drug induced, et cetera, is that it's transient, but it's treatable. And I'll let Catherine speak to that. But so it's about at that moment, can experts say that at that moment, she was unable to, appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct. You can call it whatever. It can be in or out of the DSM. It doesn't matter. And so it's really, in this case, what's interesting is that comparing this to, for example, the Andrea Yates case.
Yes.
The Andrea Yates case was like a flat out psychosis. In this case, it seems like the defense is going to bring in experts to say, or at least one expert to say, that this was a progressive situation, that there was a pharmacological component to this, that over time she deteriorated because she was cycling off of all these drugs, that this was not just sort of a one-shot psychosis. It was like developing over time. And so, again, this is going to be a battle of experts. And I think that, one thing I want to say is we always lose. There's always a concern, and it's a real concern about losing a jury when you get too sciencey on their ass, excuse my French, right? You get deep into, the psychosis and what drug did what, except they're going to they're just going to shut down. So ultimately it's about the credibility and the motive of the experts. We've got Dr. Spinelli, who is a hired gun. She's not the one, she's the one who diagnoses her with bipolar and the psychosis, but way after the incident. And so unlike Yates, she does not have the factual record of this psychosis. It just comes about and then she gets diagnosed after the homicide. So So it's interesting. Again, I think it comes down to, and Yates, by the way, got reversed because of the credibility of the state's psychiatrist.
Right.
You know, apparently he said something about Law and Order episode or whatever, and and then it got reversed based on his credibility. So my point here is that all of this, you know, how the psychosis came about, what it was, how, you know, what was going on through her head. All of this is great. They're going to get deep into it. But at some point, as a defense attorney, there's a real concern about keeping it really concise and simple, because a jury doesn't really,
I get it.
You know, go with science. Yeah.
I get it. So I don't think you need any science. I don't know how they're going to get a jury unless the jury is convinced that, look, okay, she did it because she did it, but she clearly didn't know what she was doing. And I hope when they sentence her, she just goes to a hospital and not to prison. But of course, that's not in their hands. So, Doc, let's bring you in on this to help bridge on this. Because the idea of, well, if you know that tying this around the baby's neck and holding it will kill them, then you're a murderer. What does that miss about the component of the mental illness?
I think it completely misses the mental illness, right? A psychosis means loss of touch with reality. And a postpartum psychosis, and all psychoses, wax and wane. Sometimes you may be a little more in, sometimes a little more out. So determining that, and I know nothing, you know, professionally or personally about this case, so I'm speaking in general, but, you know, and again, legally, I really know nothing. But if you need to make that case at the time of these acts, I mean, I often say, what mother in her well or right mind would kill her children? This is a woman who was ill, very, very ill. And we can debate, and they will debate all kinds of things around medications and illness
Right.
and what she had and what she didn't. But she's not evil.
And she's not the exception. She's not Casey Anthony, right? She's not, I want to party. I didn't want to be a mom. You know, this kid's dragging me down. This is a committed mom who's also committed to her mental health, you know, doing what she can do, trying.
Right.
And the pushback is, but Doc, she knew that tying the band around the neck kills the baby. She knew that. She knew jumping out the window should kill me. So, legally competent.
A person who's mentally ill, like go back to Andrea Yates, right? Her belief, her fixed, false, out of reality belief, otherwise known as a delusion, and hallucinations, command hallucinations telling her she was a bad person, and the only way for her kids to be saved was to kill them. She killed them. Right? She thought in an altruistic way she was doing the right thing. So did she know they would die? Right? She thought they would ascend to heaven, right? Because she was bad and they were cursed. So I think that you have to, you're not thinking or even appreciating the mind of someone who's got active mental illness. You may know what will kill someone, but the reason you're doing it is because you have a belief in your mind or command auditory or other hallucinations telling you to behave this way because it is the best thing for these beloved children.
Right. Now, here is the sad reality. Prisons, as Sara Azari knows, and I know, and you may know, Doc, but you're about to know if you don't, they are filled with profoundly mentally ill people who had no idea what they were doing when they did it. So why are they there? Law is very narrow, the policy behind it narrower still. We punish. We don't like mental illness. It's weird. How can Chris Cuomo have anything go? He looks fine. The guy's built like a tank. He's fine. No, he's got depression. He's got this. He's got that. Yeah, I don't see it. You know, suck it up. Don't be sad. We are way primitive, right? We're just starting to make little incremental. You still can't call addiction anything to do with mental illness. Oh, no. That's choice. That's choice. You took those drugs. Oh, no, but they were self-medicated. Yeah, but not at first. But at first you just liked it. You're just a partier. And now it's out of control. It's on you. That's who we are as a society. You do not see it in Europe. The jurisprudence on these cases is very, very different. They go hospital first before they even contemplate trials. So, but here we are. And Sara, to that point, that what feels right is not what is right within our system. You're going to jail if you knew that what you did was likely to cause death to somebody and you did it.
Yeah, I mean, look, LA County Jail, Cooks County Jail, and Riker Island each have more mentally ill inmates than any psychiatric ward in the United States. I was shocked when I read that. And we are very quick to send people to jail and prison where it's the wrong destination. Obviously, number one, they don't get treated there. They deteriorate there. And so, but I think the difference in this case, I mean, when you're talking about mental illness, that's one thing. When you're talking about not guilty by reason of insanity, you know, I think another case we're dealing with right now, we don't know the evidence all that well yet, is the Nick Reiner case, you know, where his might have been drug induced, but in that moment where he killed his parents, you know, he had a perfectly normal day, like Lindsay Clancy did. She took her kid to the pediatrician. She, I don't know, went up and down stairs according to her fitness tracker. She had a completely normal day until she didn't, right? And it's that kind of transient thing, but obviously with some history. And so I think that's the difference, is do we want to throw her in with all the other mentally ill people that we get wrong? Or was she literally, legally not sane at the time? And I think that, you know, that goes to, she filed a medical malpractice lawsuit earlier this year. And there's a lot of history about her in that lawsuit, which will come in this trial. So it's not like she's coming out of nowhere and saying she was insane at the time. There's some, you know, there's some history about how she deteriorated. But yeah, I mean, I think the tragedy in this case is that you've got a maternal mental health tragedy trying to fit that into a system that is about really bad guys, you know, cold-blooded murderers that we're trying to put away, and they just get swooped in, you know?
And what's interesting is, look, I get what you're saying, and it's very savvy. This prosecutor doesn't want to own this shit. 3 dead kids. I'm not letting her go. How am I tough on crime? You know, that headline's going to kill me. That ad's going to kill me in the next election. That's why I hate that prosecutors are elected, because you don't know what you're voting for in the first place. Like, you know, who knows? And, you know, the people who are voting, like, they don't know how to assess who's a lawmaker, let alone a prosecutor. But here we are once again. And it's interesting because the only fact that helps her in a, you know, totally stupid way, Doc, is, well, she tried to kill herself too. So it wasn't, I killed my kids because I was getting divorced. I killed my kids because I wanted a different life, you know, whatever it is.
Well, Chris, the prosecution's saying that's consciousness of guilt. That's the way that they're spinning the suicide attempt.
Right after?
Right after.
No, but I'm saying that's the part. I think they're going to have a hard time arguing that. But let's talk about clinically why. Right. And this is the uncomfortable space, Doc, where in my world, if you go to the store and seem normal, you can't be abnormal an hour later. That doesn't work like that. That's choice. That's behavior.
That is
what are we missing?
You're missing mental illness doesn't function that way. That the waxing and waning quality of a psychotic person can mean that certain things are within normal limits and others aren't. So I wouldn't say it, you know, Sara, not to contradict so much as to say, she may have had a normal appearing day, but we have no idea what was going on in her head, what demons she was actively fighting. I don't know, but those cases that I have treated, and I've treated a lot of patients with postpartum psychoses, they drop their kids off at school. They go do all kinds of things that look normal. So I get why it's super confusing to feel like, wow, if she could do this, how could she do that? But if you have a belief in your mind that it needs to be this way, and you are being told that, or there is this I don't know, scotoma, what's the word? Sort of this something in your brain that's very circumscribed, telling you that it is this way and they must die and I'm going to die with them. None of us can exist because God knows what. I don't know what the voices or delusions were about, but that can be existing within a seemingly normal system.
Why doesn't reason take us inside the explanation of illness? When I have a thought in my head to do something bad, I go, "Oh, no, don't do that. That's bad. But you don't do that. Don't say that. Don't be that." So what happens when someone has what is a voice in your head? And how is it that someone can't distinguish doing the bad thing from the good thing in that moment?
Well, there's a line, and sometimes this is sort of an old way to put it. There's like neurotic and psychotic, and there's that line that you don't want to go over into non-reality, right? You're describing, sort of the old-fashioned, you get it, you're freaked out by it. The thought that could happen, you're like, oh my God, I would never, but I had a thought. We've all had fleeting, wildly, horrible thoughts. But when you can't discern that, when your insight is limited, poor, or non-existent, and your judgment is also, like, you have judgment, you still had judgment and insight to know it was wrong. You lose that over the line to psychosis. You do not have that. You live in a different land, and you don't have that kind of reasoning or capacity. It's not there.
Right. So, Sara, the opening statement in a case like this, why isn't it as not easy, but as simple as no mother strangles their 3 kids and then jumps out the window to kill themselves? Nobody does that. A selfish person doesn't do that. An evil person doesn't do that. Nobody does that. The only person that does that is somebody who's not in control of what they're doing. Sane is, what did you think you were doing with this band? I thought I was killing them. Why? Here's my reason. Okay, but you knew that this was killing them, right? Yes.
Well, I mean, that
Then
okay,
that's
you
it. It's
are,
over.
yeah, you're being the prosecutor. I mean, the prosecutor is also going to say that she had plenty of opportunity to stop, because strangulating kids with or anyone with takes time to unconsciousness, takes time to death, and so she could have stopped, but she did it, right? But again, I think we can't forget about the emotional and moral spine of the defense, which is the husband, who is going to talk about how much she loved these kids, that she couldn't have done this knowingly, that she had to have been out of her mind to do this. Listen, I think one of the bigger questions here is, okay, so she's acquitted by LCR. She just walks out of the courtroom? No, she may never see the light of day, because she's going to be in an institution, because every year she's going to be in this adversarial process where they're going to petition her to stay in year after year after year. So, it's better than prison or jail. I don't want to say it's the same thing, because she gets treatment. She will not get treatment in prison. She'll deteriorate. But at the end of the day, it's not like, a not guilty verdict where the defendant walks out with their lawyer. This is not what's happening here. So the question is the destination. What is the right destination for her?
It's interesting. The suit that I would be more interested in, and Doc, this one you will want to talk about, is the husband is filing civil suit against the providers and saying, you knew or had reason to know or should have known that my wife was way down the line and that nothing was working and it was getting worse. And you didn't do anything to remove her from this kind of risk.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Right. Everybody froze for a sec. I can understand that one might say that or, believe that. I don't know the particulars of things, but I think generally speaking, like, mothers don't typically kill their kids. Doctors try to do the right thing, right? Do no harm. We take an oath. So I don't know the circumstances, but my guess is that people were doing their best. If they weren't, I assume that'll be figured out.
Well, also talk about how difficult it is to know what somebody's potential is, and talk about how difficult it is to do something, even if you think that, oh my God, I think this person's going to go kill somebody.
Well,
how limited the options are and how limited the relief is.
Well, you do need cooperation from a patient and family, right? You do need, it is a collaborative process. So again, I'm not trying to place blame on anybody,
Right.
but I would say that I treat patients day in and day out. They don't always want to do what I professionally believe they should do, and I can't put that pill in their mouth, nor say you should cross taper these medications, or you're on these but don't take those, or know what they do at home in their medicine cabinet. I don't control any of that. That is purely what they do as a consumer, as somebody who
Right.
has agency. I can't do that, but I can give my professional opinion. Doesn't mean someone's going to take it.
Right.
Again,
And then if you do want to act on them, you have to call the police. If they don't cooperate, obviously, and you don't have a specific law in your jurisdiction that helps you with this, you're going to have a hard time getting them put anywhere for any length of time.
Yes, but there are, there in different states, there are, rules of law that help you. If I think someone's an imminent danger to themselves or others, I can call 911 or the police, or,
Right.
there are things I can do that I do when I need to
Right.
act in cases like that. Right. And then they're in a involuntary hospital situation, and it goes from there.
But Catherine, in this case, one of the providers actually turned them away, saying that she didn't have a plan.
A plan to kill herself or anybody else.
To harm.
That in the moment has to be assessed by that doctor in that clinical interaction. Again, knowing nothing, we all have to make that determination every time we see a patient.
Right.
So every time I am making an assessment anew, given the context, given the history, has this ever happened before? What do I think the potential is for the future? I'm making that clinical, professional, opinion. That's my job.
Right.
I make that every time I see a patient. So in that moment, might it not have been clear that was where she was headed? Perhaps. But it has to be assessed each and every time.
Right. That's the problem with it, is that the reality of the science doesn't meet the expectations of the culture. And Sara, the interesting line to walk, the ace, what's the ace in the hole in this perverse way is having the husband. But the husband's got to be careful because, he's not been charged, but, if he gets up there and he's like, oh, she was crazy. There's no way that she could have been understanding what was going on. She was spiraling. Well, why'd you leave her with your kids? So there's a little bit of a
double-edged sword.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know. I would be concerned about exposure for her husband. And I don't know if he has a lawyer, if he's going to be given any sort of immunity, because he is also a witness for the prosecution.
Yes.
So he's a witness for both sides. And now typically if he was just a witness for the defense, good luck trying to get immunity, from the other side. But since he's also their witness, I'm wondering whether there will be some sort of immunity, or at least, an attorney appointed to him. But you're right. He does have some exposure. That day, and this is part of the premeditation evidence for the prosecution, she sent him out to a further spot to pick up food, further than the normal place that they would get takeout from, and also sent him on a pharmacy errand. And so the whole idea that the prosecution,
she bought time.
To create the opportunity and the time to strangle her children. So, if you think your wife is that volatile mentally, wouldn't you just call Uber Eats as opposed to going out and picking up the food?
Well, it's about in that moment, right?
Yeah,
To the doctor's point, is that it is completely likely, this isn't a 1 in a million within this genre of illness, where you can have a different feeling about somebody's character and nature in a given moment, doctor.
Yeah, it is what is happening at that moment with the particular illness, what's happening. And again, it could be shrouded in what appears to be quite normal.
What is the simple definition for the lay people of a voice in the head? What is that really?
It's a hallucination. It's right. So again, psychosis is the line over not reality. You're outside of the norm of reality. And what we know about it is that there can be voices that come sort of inside the head from outside the head. You can be internally responding or stimulated by things that are happening within the brain that you think are actually real, right? This is a physiological or biological part of these illnesses. Now, you had mentioned before, these can be drug-induced, substance-induced, and we separate that. I don't know if that was involved here. Generally, medications don't cause these kinds of things. They treat them. But this is part of what's generated in the brain and mind of somebody who has a psychotic illness, right? You can believe the TV has special messages for you, right? The paranoia comes from this. You can believe meaning is made from, the way planes are crossing in the sky. It's a message for you, right? These ideas of referencing you. There are all these different ways in which the mind, in lay terms, plays tricks on you, but you believe it.
It's so hard to try to take the jury inside of somebody's head, in January of 2023, but it is a circumstantial case. They look at the record, they look at her medicines, they look at her husband's testimony and how she deteriorated. And then the difficulty is confounded by looking at her in the trial, so poised and aware and like nothing's wrong with her. But because of the standard of proof and because of the record, the factual record, I see this, if I was going to read the tea leaves, as a not guilty by LCR.
But as you said, that doesn't mean that she goes free. And look, that's just part of the paradox here, because look, why do we like to punish? Well, because it's our proxy for the agency of the victims. The crime is against the state. The crime is against the municipality, the government, but the victim is who motivates the advocacy beyond whatever the policy of the law is. And here, well, the mother can't suffer any more than she is going to every time she's cognizant of what she did. And the father is the only other person who could be nearly as injured, and he is with her. So that is a very tricky set of facts. This change in the law, doctor, comes down to what you can help us understand. So that 67 case was very tricky, and this is why it didn't really become the test for the state. It was really limited to that one case because it was irrepressible impulse. You are too young, but there was a sketch with Abbott and Costello called Slowly I Turned, which is where every time some hypnotist had put this in somebody's head, every time you would say a word, all of a sudden it would trigger you into being a killer. And they would go, slowly I turn. And it was a comedy sketch. Irrepressible impulse. I couldn't help myself in that moment. That case was the first time that Massachusetts law recognized that that's a thing. Why is it a thing? Why is an irrepressible impulse as opposed to that's just where you always feel?
Well, it is so not who she is. You look at this woman's history, you have to take the context into account. This is not who she was in her professional or personal life. It's such a cluster, right? It's such it's so dichotomous. It's hard to accept that this poised, beautiful woman could possibly feel this way inside her head. It's hard to get inside that head, but I think in a way you're sort of saying, get inside the head of someone who is feeling disconnected, disorganized, confused about reality as it relates to this specific thing, not everything, but this specific thing, and they believe it hook, line, and sinker, and they act because they are acting out what the mental illness is telegraphing. It is, I don't know, again, I don't know the word, an irresistible impulse. I don't know that doesn't make that much sense to me. It's more that the illness dictates this. It is well-known part of an illness like this, period.
To me, as I'm not a doctor, I just know being around individuals like my own sister taking psychotropic drugs for depression, for example. There was a period of time where those cocktails were not, the doctors couldn't get it right. They had all the good intentions. Yeah. And so that's right. It's trial and error, which is, it's it was scary. I mean, it's
should be a
scary
lot
because
farther along, right? There isn't research, there isn't money put towards women's mental health, right? This is a real lack in the system and in our society to value.
I think their health altogether, not just their mental health.
It's all physical and mental, and that's all one. But it really is. It is trial and error, and it's the pharmacogenetics of it. We're all going to respond differently to the same medication. So you got to try. And so you'll be cross tapering from one to another, and someone is not treated in that acute phase when you're trying to get to stability.
When you get ignorance and patriarchal, right, which is a different type of chauvinism and bias, you wind up with a system where we are in a situation right now where you start with the premise that, well, look, no woman does something like this, okay? No woman in their right mind, no mother does anything like this. But we're now going to tell you about a system that ignores the needs of women in times of crisis so that they're more susceptible to being exactly this kind of woman that we're saying doesn't exist. And that is our reality, that oxymoronic paradox of we have this standard, but we do nothing to support this standard.
That's gaslighting. I mean,
and that's where you wind up where we are. All right, this was very helpful. Thank you for walking me through it this way, clinically and legally. I appreciate you both for it.
It's great to be with you.
It's good to meet you, Dr. Birndorf. Thank you for helping me, Sara. I love you forever. I can't say how long because you get mad at me.
Love you a long time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So you can understand the dilemma, right? Of, well, you know, did she know? Did she not know? And what is crime and neurosis and psychosis? And even without getting in the weeds, you can kind of understand what was going on with Lindsay. You can understand it. I think you can understand it better from the defense perspective than from the prosecution's perspective, but we'll see how it plays out. And you can understand the fix that the prosecutor's in. 3 dead kids, you're going to let it go? And you can understand, you know, having to judge that. Can you understand being the father and the guilt of leaving and staying away? Doesn't matter why. You weren't there. The people who matter most to you in the world are gone. And the woman who mattered most to you in the world did it. The one who gave you the people who matter most to you in the world. And then processing what you have lost, which is everything that matters to you. And having a situation where you see the mother for the sick person that they were and probably are, you understand it, and you react to it in a way where you not only forgive, but you want to advocate for her, and you are up to doing it. That is tremendous. Even as a father, as a longtime parent, right? An old guy. I have always had a hard time understanding this when I covered the Yates case. And Rusty Yates, who I've interviewed before, Andrea Yates' then husband, and how he lived through it, how he processed it, how he survived it, how he came to see Andrea Yates and why it happened the way he did, and what it means to him today when he sees this case. Rusty, thank you. It's good to see you again.
Thank you for having me on.
When you first learned about this case, how did it impact you?
Well, I mean, my perspective is a little different. I think this has happened sporadically for a while. You know, there's a case here, a case there. I mean, I had people contact me who'd lost loved ones before this happened in our family, you know, and it's kind of like getting struck by lightning. It's like not a
common occurrence.
not that common, but it happens, you know. So as far as surviving, I think that's a good word, surviving. It's and I think we're all a little bit different, you know, like some people, you know, fundamentally we're gonna handle and process loss differently, you know. So I try to withhold judgment of people who respond differently than I do, recognizing that we're all a little different. You know, I see things differently than most, and other people see things differently than I do. That's just part of being human. So
How did you come to understand what had happened to your children and why it happened?
that's a good question. Really, it was from almost the beginning, because when the tragedy occurred and I was sitting outside the house crying, kind of going between crying and I would say, how could you do this? I don't understand. How could you do this? I don't understand. I said that over and over and over again. And then it kind of clicked. I was like, oh, yeah, there is this thing. There is this thing where women can unexpectedly kind of snap, or whatever you want to call it, and harm themselves or others. And my heart just sunk, you know, because I'm like, wow, that I knew that could happen. And I actually knew it was called psychosis. I think what I didn't realize is that what that looks like. You know, I saw it like, okay, you know, someone, you know, strips their clothes off, runs down the street and calls themselves Jesus or something, right? That's psychosis. It isn't kind of quietly trying to stay composed while dealing with all these crazy thoughts. You know, what your guest said earlier, I think is exactly true. The way I understand it is, it's very much like having a dream overlaid on your reality, like elements of a dream overlaid on your reality, so that you can't really tell what's real and what's not. So if they see spiders on the wall and slap the wall, to us, that wouldn't seem quite appropriate, right? Because they're just slapping a wall, but they literally saw spiders. I mean, it's actually activating the vision part of the brain. It's like, it's every bit as real to them as the rest of the world.
So Rusty, giving the people who aren't as familiar with your situation some context. Andrea Yates was not new to mental illness. She had had a history of mental illness and multiple hospitalizations and different attempts. How did you rationalize what was going on with her and what it meant for her being around the kids?
Oh, at that time, yeah. Well, my understanding was she'd been depressed. She had postpartum depression, you know, which, and she had in 2 years prior, after Luke was born, she had thoughts of suicide, right, during that time. Never in the course of time did she have any thoughts of harming our children, or at least that was never captured or stated or anything like that. As far as how she appeared, it was kind of like someone who's trying to compose themselves. She did have moments like your guest said earlier, where she kind of waxed and waned, where sometimes she was really kind of in a catatonic state. She might have been shaking, picking at her hair, stuff like that. But then other times she was more conversant, more functional. And so I think that was another tricky thing about understanding where she was at. It was a moving target. It wasn't a constant for months. It was kind of like, all right, how is she today? And honestly, it's a lot the same today. When I call her or visit her, it's, you know, which Andrea am I getting today? You know, it's kind of sad.
But never, but no version of Andrea in your experience had been one that you ever considered a danger to your kids.
Exactly. No, in fact, it was completely the opposite, because she's such a loving, giving, caring person. You know, if they ever scraped their knee, they weren't running to me, they were running to her, you know, because she'd dote on them and hold them and put a Band-Aid on it, even if there was no scar, you know. So whereas I might say, hey, I don't see any blood, get back after it, you know. So that was her, though. And so kind of what you said earlier, it's the person in the world that you trust most. And I think that's one of the hardest things to deal with, that level of betrayal. Because
Now,
do you ever want to put yourself in that position again where you could trust somebody to that degree where you might be betrayed again?
So the decision to testify on her behalf for the defense in the trial, how hard was that?
It was an easy decision. I was going to do what I could to help her. I think while I was on the stand, I just shook my head, because I thought this whole thing it's kind of like what you alluded to earlier. It's a complete waste of time. It's like, it's cruel, it's wasteful, it makes absolutely zero sense. And, you know, through the years, I've kind of come to realize that what we have is a legal system, not a justice system. And if we treat it like that, then it makes sense. Then it's like, okay, maybe it tries to find justice occasionally, but really it's a legal system.
You know, it's interesting. Yes, that distinction is drawn and is fair a lot. It's certainly imperfect. It certainly is imperfect. Let's just leave it at that. The interesting pushback to your assessment of this being an ineffective use of resources and emotion, the usual pushback is, oh yeah, say that to Rusty Yates, say that to the father of those kids, and now see, but you are the father of those kids, and
Exactly.
you're saying it. So how did you get over your sense of loss and pain and enable yourself to see it differently?
I don't think those are really the same thing, getting over loss and pain. And I think that's what people can get confused, that, hey, if you support Andrea, then you don't really care. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. I think it's been 25 years and I'm still, I'd say, pretty close to getting back to where I was before the loss. I mean, it's devastating, and it isn't just the kids. It's Andrea. You know, it's not always easy to find a good partner, and she and I really were good together. And also hopes and dreams. You know, you have a vision for where your life's going to go, how you're going to live it out. That's gone all in one day, right? So I treat those sort of as separate. My support of Andrea stems from, it's really pretty simple. It's the analogy I give of, okay, say I'm driving the kids along in our Suburban. I have a heart attack and swerve into oncoming traffic and everyone dies but me. You know, what on earth good would it do to prosecute me? It would make zero sense. It wouldn't serve as a deterrent. It wouldn't serve as justice. It wouldn't serve as anything. That's kind of how I view Andrea's case. She got sick. You know, if it wasn't for her sickness, right, this would never have happened. And so I don't even see how it's possible, or, you know, to try to blame someone like her or you know, or like Miss Clancy, who, you know, if they have an upstanding record, even their own family saying, look, this is completely out of character for them. But you know what, if you said that, you said it several times earlier, I found it fascinating, because if you say, hey, who thinks that someone who does something like this is necessarily insane, you'd be excluded from the jury. You wouldn't even be on the jury. That question was asked to the jury panels in the first trial, and they were all excluded. Everyone who said, hey, yeah, any mother who does this is crazy, is not on the jury.
So, right. So you're already dealing with people who are open in a way that common sense, may not favor. But so there are two trials in the Yates situation, and a lot of the factors line up very closely to the Lindsay Clancy situation.
Yeah.
And what was it like for you? You testified in the first one, you didn't testify in the second one, but someone did testify in the second, who I know pretty well, named Dr. Michael Wellner. And Wellner, of course, realized that the mother of your children was mentally ill, and she was mentally ill at the time. But the legal standard in Texas was, but did she know that what she was doing was intended to kill the children? Why she did it is not the test, or wasn't the test at that time. What was it like for you? What was it like for you to watch him testify? And, to know that he was saying, but she knew, Rusty, she knew what she did was wrong when she did it. That's why she waited for you to leave. That's why she did it the way she did. She knew, even if she's sick, it's still bad. What did you think of that?
The other state expert testified that, she heard voices, but she heard Satan's voice, so she knew it was wrong.
Right.
Like if she heard God's voice, oh no, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? That's where it comes back to legal versus justice. It's illegal.
Right. Now the prosecution lost. They lost that case. But the feeling of you testify, you say, look, this isn't Andrea. But the idea of, well, then what do you do? What do you do? Legal system, justice system. If she's not guilty, as far as you're concerned, because it's not her, so it is what it is. It's the heart attack. Did you believe that she should have just been set free?
A hospital, was right. And what's interesting, having seen this firsthand, when we were seeking treatment for her, when she was in inpatient care, the standard for release was super low. I mean, she was still way out of it when they sent her home, and maybe a change of scenery will help her. That's what Dr. Saeed said, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any medical sense to me at all. But what are you going to do? I can't, as a family member, I can't prescribe medication. I can't admit Andrea to a hospital. I'm following the doctor. I'm seeing the doctor, following the doctor's orders. Anytime I'd ask a question, he'd turn and look at his plaque on the wall. Hey, I'm the doctor. You're nobody. So we did our best in that framework, in the framework we have for medical treatment. You stayed married. This happened in 1999. You stayed married until 2004, 2005. Why? Well, the tragedy was in 2001. 2001. Yeah. 1999, she had some postpartum issues. 2001 is when the kids were killed. I'm sorry. But you stayed married for a few years. Why? Well, I think a variety of things. I think I'd always seen Andrea and me together. I didn't see us, ever apart. I thought it was kind of like a given in our relationship. I really think for both of us. And, but this was a huge betrayal of trust. So it took me a long time to kind of process that and get to the point where I could understand the difference between forgiveness and consequences. I used to think, okay, you forgive somebody, then everything's back to the way it was. No, it's like somebody steals silverware from your house. You don't have to invite them back to dinner. You may understand they needed the money for food themselves or something and forgive them, but you may not want to put yourself in that situation again. So when I realized that, I thought, whatever happens, whether she's in a state hospital, whether she's released, whatever it is, I couldn't see myself sharing a home with her again, because I couldn't trust her. She'd not tipped her hand at all. She had these thoughts and just kept them to herself. Every time I'd see her, I'd think, well, what's she keeping to herself now? What's going to happen tonight when I go to sleep? I don't know, So in the first trial, just to remind people, she was found guilty of capital murder. They didn't seek the death penalty. She went away to prison, fairly limited treatment.
because of this weird off-topic development, which was one of the state's experts said something really stupid to the jury about a TV episode of Law and Order and what that taught us about this kind of situation. And on appeal, the bench found that that was really stupid and prejudicial and overturned it, declared a new trial, and she was found not guilty, which I always thought spoke a little bit to an evolution in our understanding of what this was and what this wasn't, even in Texas. And how do you think she is today? Are you in any kind of contact? Do you know?
Well, yes, I am. And I would say that, as far as that bar, for release from a hospital, she was past that within a year. She was better than she'd been in the hospital within a year of the tragedy. I think they did keep her pretty heavily medicated through the trials, which I think is a blessing, right? And I think that's been the only respect where things have been a little harder for me than they have been for her, because I take the full brunt of it, whereas hers is muted by her medications. But through the years, she has relapsed. I mean, they took her off antipsychotic medicine maybe 3 times total, and every single time she relapsed. But I would say for the past, 10 years or so, she's been pretty stable. And I think at this point, her being in a hospital, I personally would like to see her released so that she could do simple things like go to a restaurant or go shopping or go swimming or something she enjoys. But at the same time, she's a pretty private person, and I think she enjoys the level of protection she gets from the hospital. Not just anyone could walk in and visit her or see her or comment. And I think she worries that if she was released, how would the public receive her? And so, like I said, I have my own personal preference. I've tried to encourage her along those lines through the years, but I totally respect that position because given all that, it's understandable, that she might even not want to be free herself.
What would you say to Patrick, the father and husband in the Lindsay Clancy case?
Wow. I thought about that. I think it's a super hard row. Stick with what you know. You know her. You know what she's like. I think that's got to be behind a lot of the support that you're giving her now. I would say look out for yourself too. Think about taking time to grieve, taking time for yourself, just surviving. And, you can decide, over time where you want to go in your relationship, with her. It took me a lot of years to reconcile that in my head, and I'm happy with my decision. But it's not for everyone. Some people are like, hey, I'm sticking this out thick or thin, better or worse. This is definitely worse. So if that's what you want, do it. If you see, hey, like I came to the conclusion that I couldn't trust her again, and that's not ideal either. So I said, well, I'm out. But everybody's different. And so I'd encourage you to stick to your guns, go with what you know, and don't be afraid.
Did you think that society had evolved more, that even somewhere in the Northeast is putting a woman like this on trial?
I think that honestly surprised me when I read up on this case, that this is happening in Massachusetts, which I consider to be one of the more progressive states in our country. Texas is not so surprising. When this happened, there was zero talk about not guilty by reason of insanity.
Right.
The radio shows, the prosecution, everyone's like, well, is this death or life in prison? That was the choice. It wasn't, life in prison or not guilty by reason of insanity. I'm happy with the fact that I stood up for Andrea, and I think the fact that I've been so consistent. No one has been more affected by this than I have in Andrea. But yet I'll still stand up for her because I know who she is. I understand this was only a product of her illness. It's sad. It's tragic. It's so hurtful. It's been 25 years of hurt, but it doesn't mean we can't go on and live, and it doesn't mean that we're getting it right. I know it's not easy because you start handing these out, and pretty soon everyone's saying, "Hey, I'm insane too." That doesn't work.
Right.
So I think it's going to be tough until we get, okay, here's the definitive blood test, that says, yeah, she was out of her mind, because if it's behavioral,
it's a tricky thing, especially in a culture that is punitive by nature, that is dismissive of mental health and suspicious of it. And we still call most people, you got kidney disease, we talk about kidneys. You got diabetes, we talk about diabetes. You got any kind of mental illness, we call you crazy. So we're evolving, but we got a long way to go. Rusty Yates, I appreciate your perspective, and it is good to see you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for covering this too.
All right. You be well. I'm always a call away if I can help with anything that matters to you. I've always found it remarkable how Rusty has been able to coach himself through these years. Imagine what he has had to deal with, and yet still having space in his heart for Andrea because of what his head tells him. And I guess what his heart tells him as well. And yeah, they got divorced, and he got remarried. He had another kid, and then he got divorced again. But his life went on, but in some ways it never did, right? And to hear him say it's not a justice system, it's a legal system, and that he looks at the Lindsay Clancy case and he says, how can they be trying this in this day and age? Have we not learned? What do you think? It is vexing because, man, there's nothing you want to punish more than somebody who kills kids, right? But this isn't as simple as that, is it? But emotionally, that's still kind of where it fits. And certainly that's what this prosecutor's thinking, in addition to the CYA of, I don't want to own, like Sara Azari told you, making the choice on these 3 kids. Let the jury do it. Is that the right way to do the job? Is that what the job is about? Is that about justice, or is that about just us, meaning him just thinking about what's best for him in that moment? It's tricky. Or is it not? You tell me. This is the kind of case that I believe means so much more than just the facts and the law. This is about who we are and where we are as people and what we value. And it's really annoying and it's really grating. And then one moment I'm like, well, I totally get it. It's totally cut and dry. This is what it was. And yet then you're like, but it's so wrong. It's so wrong. It's the worst kind of wrong. It's tricky. And that's why I cover it. And that's why I pick at it, to kind of help you as a critical thinker to work your way through what matters and why and in what way, and then figure out how you feel about that. So thank you for subscribing and following. Thank you for checking me out on Sirius Radio, the Chris Cuomo Project, of course, at NewsNation. The challenges are real. I think you get through them better if you get through them together. So let's get after it.